Richard Kendall's voice slurred slightly as he tapped the microphone, sending a sharp feedback screech across the ballroom. 300 employees in formal attire winced collectively. I should have known then that something was wrong. Before we wrap up, he said, swirling amber liquid in his crystal tumbler, I want to recognize someone special. Jessica Parker from marketing. My wife smiled professionally beside me, expecting the standard acknowledgement of her department's record-breaking quarter. Jessica has been instrumental to my personal satisfaction this year, Richard continued, his predatory gaze fixing on her. Some nights I can't sleep thinking about our collaborative efforts. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the worst sound imaginable. Nervous laughter spreading through the crowd like a virus. I watched colleagues exchange glances, eyebrows raised. Some women looked down at their plates, faces tight with recognition. Several men smirked knowingly. In an instant, everything my wife had built, her reputation, her credibility, her professional standing, was being dismantled by innuendo. To Jessica, Richard raised his glass, his eyes never leaving her. My favorite after-hours consultation. Jessica's hand found mine under the table, squeezing with such force I nearly gasped. When I looked at her, expecting humiliation, I instead saw something that chilled me. Pure, controlled fury behind a perfect corporate smile. Not here, she whispered through that smile. Wait. So I waited, even as the CFO shot me a pitying glance. Even as Richard's executive assistant avoided eye contact when she passed our table. Even as I overheard someone whisper, poor Mark, always the last to know. We circulated through the ballroom for exactly 93 excruciating minutes. Jessica was magnificent, laughing at the right moments, asking about children and vacation plans, maintaining flawless composure while under the microscope of corporate gossip. Only when we were safely in our car, pulling away from the hotel, did the mask slip. That disgusting worm, she hissed, ripping off her earrings with such force I worried she'd tear skin. That manipulative, egotistical parasite. What just happened back there? I asked, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Why would he imply you're having an affair? Is this because of the Anderson campaign? Did you take credit for something? He propositioned me, Mark. She cut me off flatly. 3 weeks ago, in his office. Said if I wanted to advance at Meridian, I needed to understand how things really worked, how power was exchanged. My brain struggled to process this. What? He put his hand on my leg, told me he'd been watching me since I started, that women like me understood the unspoken rules of success. Her voice was eerily calm now. When I refused, he said I'd regret it, that he could make my career very difficult. I pulled the car over, hazard lights flashing in the darkness. Why didn't you tell me? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Because I handled it, she said simply. I told him no, clearly and professionally. I thought that was the end of it. She laughed bitterly. Clearly I was wrong. We need to report this. Tonight's behavior alone. To whom exactly? Jessica interrupted. Helen in HR, who owes her entire career to Richard. The board, half of whom are his golf buddies. The police? She shook her head. This is how it works, Mark. Men like Richard don't get caught. They get protected. The resignation in her voice sparked something in me. A slow-burning rage I'd never experienced before. There has to be evidence, I said finally. No one gets away with this pattern forever without leaving traces. Jessica's expression shifted slightly. Actually, she said slowly, there might be. She explained that Richard had once bragged about his office security system, state-of-the-art cameras and microphones that recorded everything in his suite. For legal protection, he'd claimed, showing her the control panel hidden in his credenza. If those recordings still exist, she said, everything would be there. Him touching me, the threats, everything. The plan formed organically between us on the drive home. As Meridian's senior systems analyst, I had administrative access to most of the company's digital infrastructure. Not Richard's private security system directly, but the network it connected to. We need to be careful, Jessica cautioned as we reached our driveway. Richard has resources we can't imagine. Lawyers, connections, money. If we're going to do this, we need to be smarter than him. I took her hand. Then it's a good thing there are two of us. Monday morning arrived with cruel normality. Jessica dressed with deliberate care. Conservative navy suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back severely, armor for the battlefield ahead. Remember the plan, she said at the door. Act normal, gather information, trust no one. The office atmosphere was exactly as uncomfortable as we'd expected. Conversation stopped when Jessica passed. People found sudden interest in their phones when we entered the break room. My own team was conspicuously over-friendly, compensation for the awkwardness. Midday, Jessica texted, R called me in. 2 p.m. meeting? Alone. I replied immediately, don't go. Have to. Declining looks guilty. Room 713 instead of his office. Conference room 713. No recording equipment. Of course, Richard would choose neutral territory now. By 1:45, my anxiety had transformed into something cold and focused. I positioned myself casually near the elevator banks, laptop open on a side table as if catching up on emails. At precisely 1:58, Jessica emerged from marketing, walking with deliberate confidence toward her meeting. When she passed me, she didn't break stride but whispered, phone recording in my jacket pocket. Richard arrived 3 minutes late, trademark power move. He nodded curtly in my direction, either not recognizing me or not caring. I gave him 10 seconds, then moved to the small utility room adjacent to 713. Close enough to hear raised voices, close enough to intervene if necessary. The meeting lasted exactly 17 minutes. I couldn't make out specific words, just tones. Richard's alternating between soothing and stern. Jessica's maintaining professional neutrality. No shouting, no commotion. When the door opened, Richard emerged first, straightening his tie. Jessica followed moments later, face expressionless. Only when we reconnected at her car did she speak. He offered me a deal, she said, hands shaking slightly as she unlocked the door. Transfer to the Singapore office. Significant promotion. 20% salary increase. Exile, I translated. With a golden parachute, she agreed. And an NDA so restrictive, I couldn't even tell you what happened without violating it. What did you say? That I needed time to consider such a significant move. Her smile was razor sharp. He gave me 48 hours to decide. That night, after verifying no one had followed us home, we implemented phase 1 of our plan. I deployed a shadow protocol on Meridian's network, not directly accessing Richard's security system, but creating a mirror that would capture any data it transmitted for storage. By morning, we had everything. 6 months of recordings from Richard's office, including the meeting with Jessica 3 weeks prior. The footage was worse than she'd described. Richard hadn't just suggested an arrangement. He'd been explicit, graphic even, about his expectations. When Jessica refused, his demeanor had transformed instantly from seductive to threatening. You're making a serious mistake, recorded Richard had said, physically positioning himself between Jessica and the door. I decide who succeeds at Meridian, who gets promoted, who gets fired, who gets blacklisted across the industry. Is your precious moral high ground worth your career? Jessica's response had been admirably composed. Please move so I can leave, Mr. Kendall. This conversation is over. Nothing's over until I say it is, he'd replied before finally stepping aside. Think carefully about your next steps, Jessica. Very carefully. As the recording ended, we sat in stunned silence. That's textbook sexual harassment, I said finally, with a side of assault and criminal threatening. We take this to the authorities. And say what? Jessica countered. That we illegally accessed the company's secure servers? That we stole private recordings? Richard's lawyers would bury us while painting him as the victim of rogue employees. She was right, and we both knew it. Men like Richard built fortresses of legal protection around themselves precisely for situations like this. We need more, Jessica said decisively. We need to know if there were others. Phase 2 of our plan involved careful reconnaissance. Jessica began subtly reaching out to women who had left Meridian under unusual circumstances over the past several years. Most didn't return her calls. Some responded but remained guarded. 5, however, shared experiences disturbingly similar to Jessica's. He said it was part of the company culture. Meredith, formerly in finance, told us over coffee at a cafe 20 miles from Meridian's offices. That everyone understood the unwritten rules. When I refused, suddenly my performance reviews tanked. 3 months later, I was let go for not meeting expectations. He has a type, observed Alyssa, who'd been in product development. Ambitious, competent, usually without strong industry connections. Women who can't easily fight back. The company paid me to go away, said Tara, once Richard's executive assistant. 6 months' salary and benefits in exchange for signing an NDA, so restrictive, I couldn't even file for unemployment without violating it. Each woman's story followed the same pattern. Isolation, proposition, refusal, retaliation. None had reported Richard officially. All had eventually left Meridian, their careers damaged, their confidence shaken. "Would any of you be willing to come forward now?" Jessica asked gently. "Together with others?" The silence that followed provided our answer. "He told me he'd make sure I never worked in tech again," Alyssa finally said. "And I believe him." Meanwhile, I continued analyzing Richard's recordings, finding a troubling pattern beyond the harassment. In meetings with investors, Richard regularly exaggerated projections. With the board, he downplayed problems while taking credit for successes. With his executive team, he fostered competition rather than collaboration, playing favorites and punishing dissent. Most damning were his conversations with Gordon Walsh, Meridian's chief legal officer. Together, they had developed what Richard called his insurance policy, files on every board member and executive containing potentially embarrassing information. Not blackmail exactly, but leverage. "Everyone has secrets," Richard had told Gordon in one recording. "My job is knowing which ones matter." Armed with this knowledge, Jessica and I developed a three-tier strategy. Plan A: go through proper channels despite the long odds. Present evidence to HR and the board, request an investigation, and demand Richard's removal. Plan B: legal action, engage specialized legal counsel, and file formal complaints. Plan C: the nuclear option, expose everything publicly. "We start with Plan A," Jessica decided. "Give the system one chance to work." It didn't. Helen from HR listened to Jessica's account with practiced sympathy, viewed the evidence with professional detachment, then delivered the company line. "We take these allegations very seriously and will conduct a thorough investigation. In the meantime, perhaps a temporary reassignment would make you more comfortable." Translation: "We'll bury this while moving you somewhere with less influence." The board meeting was worse. After waiting 3 weeks for an appointment, Jessica was given 20 minutes with 4 board members, all men, all with long-standing relationships with Richard. They watched the recordings with visible discomfort. Then one cleared his throat and said, "This appears to show a regrettable misunderstanding between colleagues. However, the manner in which this evidence was obtained raises serious legal and ethical concerns." "A misunderstanding?" Jessica repeated incredulously. "He threatened my career if I didn't sleep with him." "That's your interpretation," another board member interjected. "I heard a passionate leader expressing disappointment about a collaborative relationship." The third board member leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but his words devastating. "Ms. Parker, Meridian values your contributions, but pursuing this matter further could have significant consequences for everyone involved, including your husband's position." The threat was unmistakable. In the car afterward, Jessica was eerily calm. Plan B it is. We engaged Deanna Michaels, a formidable attorney specializing in workplace harassment cases. Her office deliberately lacked the marble and mahogany of corporate law firms. Instead, it was practical, functional, and lined with framed newspaper articles about her victories against powerful men and institutions. "You have compelling evidence," she acknowledged after reviewing our materials. "But cases like this are wars of attrition. Richard and Meridian will deploy every resource to discredit you, delay proceedings, and drain your resolve. They'll attack your character, question your motives, and exploit any vulnerability they can find. Are you prepared for that?" Jessica didn't hesitate. "Yes." Deanna nodded approvingly. "Then let's discuss strategy." Our legal plan was comprehensive. File a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, submit a detailed report to the board, documenting both the harassment and the company's failure to address it, and prepare for a civil lawsuit against Richard personally and Meridian as an entity. The day after we filed the EEOC complaint, Richard's response came swiftly. Not from him directly, he was too strategic for that, but through channels. Jessica's access to key projects was restricted. My team's budget was suddenly under routine review. Colleagues who had previously been friendly became distant, fearing association with us might damage their own standing. Then came the settlement offer. A year's salary for Jessica, 6 months for me, continued health benefits and glowing references, all contingent on our immediate resignations and signing comprehensive NDAs. "They're scared," Deanna observed when we showed her the offer. "This is a good sign." "It doesn't feel good," I admitted. The pressure was beginning to affect us both. Jessica wasn't sleeping well. I'd developed a persistent knot in my stomach. The financial strain of legal fees loomed on the horizon. "This is when most people settle," Deanna said frankly. "The system is designed to exhaust you before you ever see a courtroom." That night, lying awake in our darkened bedroom, Jessica whispered, "I'm not sure I can do this, Mark. Every day I walk into that building feels like drowning." I pulled her closer. Then we go to Plan C. Plan C was high risk but potentially devastating. Strategic disclosure of evidence to parties who could create maximum pressure on Richard and Meridian. Not everything we had, not all at once, but enough to change the power dynamics. The next morning, Richard requested a meeting, this time with both of us, plus legal representation on both sides. We agreed, with Deanna present. The conference room felt charged with tension as Richard entered, flanked by Gordon Walsh and a sharply dressed woman introduced as Catherine Winters, outside counsel specializing in employment disputes. Richard looked less commanding than usual. There were shadows under his eyes and his customary confidence seemed forced. "Let's cut to the chase," he began without preamble. "This situation has become a distraction from Meridian's core business. While we maintain there has been no misconduct, we're willing to increase our offer substantially to put this matter behind us." Gordon slid a document across the table. The new figures were eye-watering. 2 years' salary for Jessica, 1 year for me, accelerated vesting of stock options, and comprehensive health coverage. "And in exchange?" Deanna asked, though we all knew the answer. "Full confidentiality," Catherine replied smoothly. "Immediate resignations. No further legal action. Plus a statement from Jessica acknowledging a misunderstanding regarding Mr. Kendall's mentorship approach," Gordon added. Jessica stiffened beside me. "You want me to exonerate him publicly?" "We want a clean resolution," Catherine corrected. "Here's our counteroffer," Jessica said, her voice steady. "Richard resigns. Meridian implements a comprehensive anti-harassment policy with independent oversight. The company conducts a full review of all separation agreements with female employees over the past 5 years. And I keep my job with compensation for the reputational damage I've suffered." Richard's laugh was cold. "Not happening." "Then we proceed with the EEOC complaint and civil action," Deanna replied calmly. "You should consider your position carefully," Gordon advised. "Litigation is unpredictable, expensive, emotionally draining, and discovery works both ways. Every aspect of your lives will be scrutinized." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "A reality check," Catherine interjected smoothly. "Our offer reflects Meridian's good faith effort to resolve this matter amicably. It's exceedingly generous under the circumstances. The circumstances being that your client sexually harassed my wife and threatened her career when she refused him," I said, feeling heat rise in my face. Richard's expression darkened. "Watch yourself, Parker. You're already on thin ice." "Are you threatening my client's husband now, Mr. Kendall?" Deanna asked sharply. "I'm reminding everyone of the professional standards Meridian expects," Richard replied, regaining his composure. "Now, I believe we've made our position clear. The offer remains open for 48 hours. After that, we proceed to litigation." As they gathered their materials to leave, Richard paused beside Jessica. "This could have been so much simpler," he said quietly. "Yes," she agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "You could have just respected your employees." In the elevator afterward, I released a shaky breath. "That went about as expected." "Worse," Deanna corrected. "The demand for a public statement exonerating Richard suggests they're worried about more than just your case. They're anticipating additional allegations." "Or they've already received them," Jessica said thoughtfully. "Back home, we weighed our options. The settlement would solve our immediate problems, the financial pressure, the daily stress, the uncertain outcome of litigation. But it would do nothing for the women who had come before Jessica or those who would come after. I can't take their money and walk away," Jessica said finally. "I couldn't live with myself." That night, we finalized Plan C. I had continued monitoring Richard's office recordings, creating secure backups of particularly damning conversations. There was a pattern beyond the harassment. Richard regularly discussed company matters he shouldn't, made inappropriate comments about female employees, and occasionally revealed questionable business practices. We carefully compiled 3 separate packages of evidence. Package 1, a series of clips showing Richard's pattern of harassment, with victims' identities obscured, but his behavior unmistakable. Package 2, recordings of Richard discussing questionable financial practices with his inner circle, including conversations about massaging the numbers before investor calls and strategic accounting to maximize executive bonuses. Package 3. The complete recording of Richard's meeting with Jessica, unedited and devastating in its clarity. Using secured communication channels and a VPN to mask our location, we distributed the packages strategically. Package 1 went to every board member individually, along with Meridian's 3 largest institutional investors. Package 2 was sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower office and to a senior financial reporter at the Wall Street Journal known for investigating corporate malfeasance. Package 3 we held in reserve, our nuclear option if the first 2 failed to create sufficient pressure. The email accompanying each package was simple. Richard Kendall's leadership at Meridian Technologies. The evidence speaks for itself. Then we waited, continuing our daily routines while monitoring news and company communications for any reaction. For 36 tense hours, nothing happened visibly. Jessica went to work as usual, though she noticed increased whispers and closed-door meetings among executives. I continued my projects, watching network traffic for any unusual security sweeps that might indicate they were hunting for the source of the leaks. On the morning of the 3rd day, everything changed. The Wall Street Journal published an article titled, "Meridian CEO Under Scrutiny for Alleged Financial Improprieties and Workplace Misconduct." The piece cited audio recordings provided by anonymous sources and noted that both the SEC and Meridian's board had received similar evidence. By market open, Meridian's stock had dropped 8%. By mid-morning, the company had issued a terse statement announcing a board investigation into recently surfaced allegations. By noon, Jessica had been called into an emergency meeting with senior leadership, without Richard present. She texted me from outside the conference room. 7 board members here are nowhere in sight. Gordon looks like he might vomit. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When Jessica finally emerged, her expression was complex, part triumph, part exhaustion, part disbelief. "They know it was us," she said as soon as we were alone in her car. "They didn't say it directly, but they know." "What happened?" "The board has placed Richard on administrative leave, pending investigation. They've engaged an external law firm to review everything, the harassment allegations, the financial questions, all of it." She laughed softly. "They spent the entire meeting alternating between demanding to know my involvement in corporate espionage and practically begging me not to take my story public." "What did you tell them?" "That I had no knowledge of leaked recordings but would cooperate fully with any legitimate investigation into Richard's behavior." Her smile was tight. "I also mentioned that I've documented every retaliatory action since filing my complaint." Within days, the situation escalated beyond Meridian's ability to contain it. 3 major business publications ran stories on the developing scandal. A financial analyst report questioned Meridian's governance practices. 2 large investors publicly demanded transparency and accountability. Richard, meanwhile, had disappeared, reportedly on personal leave at his lake house, unreachable even to his executive team. Gordon Walsh had suddenly recused himself from the investigation, citing potential conflicts of interest. A week after we'd implemented Plan C, Meridian Technologies announced Richard Kendall's resignation, effective immediately. The press release cited his desire to focus on personal matters and made no mention of the allegations swirling around him. The company's interim CEO, Barbara Chen from operations, notably the highest-ranking woman at Meridian, issued a separate statement committing to a comprehensive review of company policies and practices and promising accountability at all levels. We had won, it seemed, but victory felt precarious. "This isn't over," Deanna warned when we met to discuss next steps. "Richard has resources, connections, and now a personal vendetta. He'll look for ways to strike back." She was right. Within days of his resignation, Richard's counteroffensive began. Not against Meridian, which had quickly distanced itself from him, but against us. First came the lawsuit, a personal action alleging defamation, corporate espionage, invasion of privacy, and theft of proprietary information. The damages sought were astronomical, clearly designed to bankrupt us even if we prevailed. Next came the Whisper campaign. Former colleagues reported hearing rumors questioning Jessica's professional competence, suggesting she'd been on the verge of termination before manufacturing harassment claims. Similar murmurs began circulating about my technical abilities and trustworthiness. Most disturbing was the surveillance, subtle but unmistakable. Cars lingering near our home, a man photographing us at restaurants, unusual activity on our personal email accounts. Richard was sending a message, "I have resources and I'm watching you." The pressure began affecting our marriage. We argued about whether to proceed with the EEOC complaint or accept a settlement, about selling our house to fund legal fees, about whether the vindication was worth the cost. Maybe we should just leave, I suggested during a particularly difficult night. Move somewhere new. Start over. And let him win? Jessica's voice was strained. Let him do this to someone else? This isn't just about principle anymore, I countered. It's about our lives, our future. The turning point came unexpectedly. A former Meridian executive contacted Jessica through a secure channel, requesting a meeting at a private location. Against Deanna's advice, we agreed, taking precautions to ensure we weren't followed. Catherine Morris had been Meridian's chief operating officer until her abrupt departure 3 years earlier. Industry rumor had attributed her exit to a strategic disagreement with leadership. The truth, we learned, was far uglier. Richard didn't just harass me, she explained in the private room of an out-of-the-way restaurant. He systematically undermined me when I refused him, excluded me from key decisions, turned the board against me. When I finally resigned, I signed an NDA so restrictive I couldn't even explain to my family why I left. Why are you breaking it now? Jessica asked. Because you two did what I couldn't, Catherine replied simply. You fought back, and you're not alone. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a list of names, 27 women who had left Meridian over the past decade after interactions with Richard. All had signed NDAs, all had stories, and crucially, all were now willing to break their silence collectively. Richard's power came from isolation, Catherine explained. He picked us off one by one. But together, that's a different equation. With Catherine's help, we coordinated a remarkable act of solidarity. 23 women ultimately agreed to come forward simultaneously, each providing a detailed account of Richard's behavior and Meridian's complicity in concealing it. Their stories, compiled into a comprehensive document with supporting evidence where available, created an undeniable pattern spanning years. The package was delivered to 3 destinations: Meridian's full board, the EEOC investigators handling Jessica's complaint, and a national news organization known for breaking the stories that had launched the Nasource Me Too movement. The response was seismic. The news organization published a major investigative piece titled, "The System: How Corporate Culture Protected a Predator." Meridian's stock plummeted 15% in a single day. The board called an emergency meeting that lasted 18 hours. Richard's lawsuit against us was quietly withdrawn 3 days later. The surveillance stopped. The whisper campaign died. 1 week after the story broke, Meridian announced a comprehensive settlement with all affected current and former employees, including significant financial compensation, removal of all NDAs, and structural reforms to company governance. Barbara Chen was named permanent CEO, with a mandate to rebuild the company's culture and reputation. Richard, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. 3 former employees filed criminal complaints for assault. The SEC launched a formal investigation into financial irregularities during his tenure. Former business associates distanced themselves. His 3rd wife filed for divorce. The empire he'd built through intimidation collapsed once its foundation of fear was removed. 6 months after the gala where he'd tried to destroy Jessica's reputation, we attended a different Meridian corporate event. The atmosphere was transformed, more diverse, more genuine, less hierarchical. Barbara Chen acknowledged the company's troubled past directly in her remarks, then outlined concrete changes implemented to prevent similar abuses. Jessica had been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, part of a leadership team now evenly balanced between men and women. I had been asked to lead a new initiative on ethical data management. More importantly, we had begun healing, both individually and as a couple. As we circulated through the event, a junior employee approached Jessica somewhat hesitantly. "I just wanted to say thank you," the young woman said. "I almost left tech after my first job because of someone like him. Knowing what you did, that you fought back and won, it matters to people like me." Later that night, as we drove home under a canopy of stars, Jessica reached for my hand. "Worth it?" I asked quietly. She considered the question, thinking of the stress, the fear, the financial uncertainty we'd endured, but also of the 23 women finding collective strength, of the company beginning genuine transformation, of the young employee who might now have a different future. "Completely," she said finally. "Some systems can't be fixed from within. Sometimes you have to tear them down to rebuild." We had discovered something profound through this ordeal, not just about corporate power or the strength found in solidarity, but about ourselves, about the kind of people we wanted to be, the kind of world we wanted to help create. 1 year to the day after Richard had attempted to humiliate Jessica before the entire company, we spotted him dining alone at a restaurant across town. The once imposing figure looked diminished, older, grayer, his former confidence replaced by something wary and defensive. He noticed us immediately, his expression cycling through surprise, anger, and finally a grudging acknowledgement. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded slightly, not quite an apology, but a recognition. Of defeat, perhaps, or possibly, though I doubted it, of understanding. We didn't approach him, didn't need to. The man who had once seemed invincible, who had wielded his power like a weapon, now sat alone with the consequences of his actions. Jessica squeezed my hand as we walked past, heading toward our own table and our own future. One built on integrity rather than intimidation, on partnership rather than power. Some battles, she said quietly, are worth fighting even when they seem impossible to win. I thought about everything we'd been through, the fear, the doubt, the moments when surrender seemed the only rational choice, and I thought about what we'd accomplished, not just for ourselves but for others who would come after us. With the right ally, I replied, nothing is impossible. She smiled, the same smile that had captivated me years ago, before Meridian, before Richard, before we discovered just how formidable we could be together. Nothing at all, she agreed.
The moral of this story is that true power lies in integrity and solidarity, not in intimidation or wealth. Toxic systems and abusive leaders rely on isolating their victims and using fear or money to buy silence. However, courage is contagious. When people refuse to compromise their self-respect and stand united against a bully, even the most untouchable predators can be brought down. It proves that standing up for what is right, even when it is terrifying and difficult, is always worth the fight.